All right, North Smithfield Planning Board is called to order at 7:04 this evening. Before we start anything on our agenda, I would like to just take a moment of silence for the things that are going on up in Lewiston, Maine. Whether you're affected directly, have family up there, I know I do. I'd just like to take a moment of silence to pay our respects for those folks that are going through some tough stuff right now. All right, thank you. Second item on the agenda tonight is roll call. Ms. Marandola? Here. Dr. Roberts? Here. And the chair is here. Item number 4, disclosure. Planning board members shall disclose potential conflicts on matters before the planning board. Is there anything that needs to be disclosed this evening? No. Okay. And then disclosure and notice. Planning board members shall disclose any ex parte communications about any contested or material adjudicatory facts or opinions concerning the merits of any application before the planning board. Does anybody have anything there? Okay. Item 6, declaration of voting members will be Ms. Marandola, Dr. Roberts, and myself.
Mr. Chairman, item number 2, minutes. Did you want to do the minutes?
Did I skip over that?
3, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do want to do that. Okay. Thank you. All right. Sorry about that. Review and approval of the September 28th, 2023 meeting minutes. Give everybody a minute to look those over.
I wasn't here, so I don't know if you need more than 2 people, but I was not here.
Probably need more than 2 people to vote on that.
No, it's a majority of the quorum.
Okay. Anything to add?
No.
Any concern? Okay. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? I'll second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Takes care of that. So we are on to item number 7, public hearing and major land development preliminary plan for Storage Rentals of America, location at 395 Eddie Dowling Highway, Assessor's Plat 13, lots 103 and 104. Mr. Planner, I'll turn that over to you, and then the applicant can present their plan.
This is an application that received master plan approval from the planning board, I believe back in the late winter, early spring. They were required to go to the zoning board for appropriate special use permits and some dimensional variances. They received those. I believe they have all their state permits in hand, and they're back before the planning board for preliminary approval. Basically, there's an existing storage facility. They purchased some adjacent land. They'll be merging the property together and building a new building to be associated with the existing storage facility.
All right, thank you. Is here representing the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Parr. My name is Scott Partington. I'm an attorney. My offices are at 2176 Mendon Road in Cumberland. And I'm here for the applicant. And as Mr. Carullo indicated, he described the basic project, which is 2 lots. There's an existing facility on one. We intend to construct a 61,000 plus square foot, 3-story self-storage facility. Also, this is in the aquifer, the overlay, which required special use permits, which we received before the zoning board. So basically, at master plan, my recollection, there were several conditions and items that were raised by the planning board at that time. Several of them were addressed. I have Mr. Letty from the engineers here today who testified at master plan. And my hope is that he can bring those, he can testify as to what all of those or those that have been addressed of those concerns that were raised at master plan. And also, as Mr. Carullo has indicated, we do have permits in hand now from DEM, which took us a little while on a back and forth because we thought we may have to come here and ask for approval subject to receiving those permits. Fortunately, we have those. Also, you've probably been able to see that there were recommendations, I'm sure they'll be read into the record later, but from the planning department about approval for preliminary. And there was the merging of the lots, which the applicant has no objection to at all. Also, but there was an issue with the fire department approval. Fire suppression, which is on site, there's no water available to the site. And I had spoken to the planner about that, and there was an exchange of emails between Marshall Maury and the architect, to which Mr. Kula was privy. And fortunately, there's an indication from the fire marshal that the plans and the drawings that he received and the capacity that he reviewed were going to be acceptable, with the proviso that, well, you know, during the permitting process, if anything else becomes evident, then he'll address it at that time. In my discussions with Mr. Carullo, he said that he would be willing to recommend to the board that condition, at least at this point, has been satisfied if and when you take up the vote on the preliminary. So if you have no further questions of me, I think that I'd like to bring Mr. Leddy up to bring up to speed on what's been done since the approval of the master plan, and hopefully resolve any other questions you might have, okay? Also, for purposes of his testimony, again, Mr. Leddy did present at master plan and was accepted by the planning board for purposes of the record, as far as accepting him as an expert tonight. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Luddy from Kimley-Horn, civil engineer for the project, with offices at 1 North Lexington Avenue, Suite 505, White Plains, New York. And if you don't mind, can you pull up the prelim plans? As the project attorney mentioned, we had gone through the extensive permitting process associated with this, namely getting the environmental permits through RIDEM, as well as through obtaining a waiver from RIDOT indicating that there's no interest from them. I'm going to briefly walk through the plans with the major items as noted during master site plan as we've developed. Largely, this plan is consistent with what the board has seen before master plan, with a few more details ironed out, and of course, all the approvals are in hand. If you don't mind, can you go to the site plan? Keep going. Right there. There we go. Thank you very much. Just to briefly bring the board up to speed, plan north is actual north. The site is an existing developed storage rental site, and the lower half of the page is lot 104. The upper half of the page is lot 103. Lot 103 is the one that's going to be receiving the majority of the development. As the initial board indicated, a interest in the drainage understanding, the drainage flow paths, as well as the fire water sprinkler. So the fire water sprinkler is integral to the building, and there's been no exceptions taken at this time by the fire marshal as to that design. The stormwater runoff generated by this new facility flows majoritively to page left into the infiltration basin that we had designed with suitable pretreatment. There's a ridge in the upper right-hand corner of the building. So everything probably at 1 o'clock or so flows down towards the right-of-way. It is intercepted before it gets to the right-of-way by a series of dry wells with pretreatment. The remainder of the site runoff, including the building, flows left towards that infiltration basin where it's treated. Other conditions that came up as part of the application were in regards to the building itself and obtaining the necessary special use permits, which have all been obtained. Landscaping has now been provided by a licensed RLA, and there were some modular units that were existing on site that originally during master plan were going to be proposed between the infiltration basin and the building in that grassed area. Since then, we've moved the infiltration basin closer to the building, hence necessitating the removal of those modular units, so they've been removed from the plan. The building is, in fact, solar ready. That was a condition of master plan approval, and we've agreed to do that. And the materials to the building, we have those available, but I believe the building facade has stayed largely the same from when it was before the board for master site plan. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you may have.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Thank you. I would just like to understand a couple of things. One is, you talked about the dry wells that would receive the runoff, and you talked about treatment. Where does that water go once it's been treated?
So the dry wells are a totally infiltrating practice. So they're captured and then they're just infiltrated over time into the ground.
Okay.
So it doesn't actually flow into a different system.
Okay. And you're saying that knowing that it's over the aquifer, you've satisfied whatever needs to be satisfied through the zoning approval that you received?
Yeah, the project attorney can speak a little bit more, but yeah, we've received all the appropriate zoning approvals because of the
Okay.
aquifer district.
Okay. And
Yeah.
thank you. And then my other question is related to that. How is it treated? Is it naturally getting filtered through something? I just would like to understand how it gets treated.
Yeah, so the stormwater management approach on this site is largely detention and infiltration, basically meaning we're not letting stormwater leave. We're trying to keep it on site and slowly over time infiltrate it into the ground itself. I'm going to speak mostly to the infiltration basin on the left. As stormwater runs off from the building in the asphalt parking lot, it's going to make its way to the top right corner. There's a little pea gravel diaphragm and a little forebay, basically a much smaller version of the detention pond, where a lot of solids, your contaminants are going to be treated. Over time, the forebay fills up naturally with water. It runs over riprap into the lower half of the basin. That's where the majority of the detention occurs, and during those high intensity storms, that's going to fill up. Over time, it all infiltrates down. In extremely large storm events, there is a riprap weir in the bottom left corner, and that flows naturally off-site.
Okay, thank you. And then I had one other question. Oh yeah, I just wanted to understand a little bit more about, I heard what the gentleman said about the fire marshal and water and that kind of thing, but I didn't understand the nature of the possible conflicts, for lack of a better word. So it sounds like there's something that might be maybe precarious, but that the fire marshal said, no, it's not a problem. I just wanted to understand. I thought there was something about no water on site and there might have been a problem, and I was just, I didn't understand what that was.
So the new building is going to be sprinklered for fire suppression. There's not an existing main that's easily accessible for that new building. And as part of the fire suppression requirements, trying to make sure that there's adequate fire protection, the architect is going to install a cistern, a large water tank inside the building. So that'll meet the fire suppression
Okay.
needs immediately.
Thank you. I missed that part. So I was like, how is it getting resolved? I didn't hear. Oh, okay.
That's why I'm here.
Thank
For
you.
the
Thanks so
clarities.
much. That's great. Those were the questions I had at this moment.
Excuse me. Also, Doctor, you raised a question, and that was, I think, one of the major concerns was the fact, this location in the groundwater protection overlay. And just hopefully to allay any concerns you have about that, your code has that separate section that deals with the overlay, and it requires special use permits. Now, in zoning parlance, that is the easiest relief to get, and it's like, basically, it's a permitted use, and let the zoning board take a look at it, it's okay, But in this instance, there's a specific list of many concerns and standards that have to be met. And the chairman was very, he was very certain that we met all of those requirements. So to the extent that remained any kind of a concern, I know you had raised it, that we did get zoning board approval, and all of those many standards that had to be met were addressed.
Thank you. That's great. I do have one question about the filtration system. So I'm just picturing, like the oil and just different residues that are on the blacktop, from cars leaking and that kind of thing, and then it goes into that catchment thing. Do the chemicals and contaminants get filtered through that pea gravel? Like I just would like to understand how that happens because of the water recharge area, and I hear you and am very glad that rigorous process, it was found that you meet all the standards. I would just like to understand how it gets filtered.
Yeah, sure. Can we scroll down approximately 5 pages?
I'm also on the water supply review committee, so that's where those questions are
Stop
coming
right there,
from. Yeah.
please. Yep. So stormwater 102. The majority of the stormwater, like I said before, is running off the building, and there is a concern with motor vehicle surface, especially with some of those oils that naturally come off of it. The stormwater philosophy here is to try and run it through grass filter as much as possible. It's a natural way of doing it. So as water is leaving the asphalt, leaving those drive aisles, it goes over that pea gravel diaphragm. So your first amount of water doesn't actually even make it to the basin. It gets held with the contaminants into that pea gravel diaphragm, where over time it naturally settles into the ground. Any water that goes over the pea gravel diaphragm then goes into the forebay. The forebay's job is mainly to take out sediment and solids, some of your large soils, which may not be applicable since it's being run off of a drive aisle, but any other large solids, that's where it's going to be kept and detained. And there's going to be regular maintenance of that basin. Someone's going to come out, make sure that it's clean, making sure that it's well mowed and that it's cared for. The industry has generally found that you want to try and use grass and natural green space as your filters. So this design is consistent with that and consistent with the Rhode Island Stormwater Manual, where we're trying to use as much natural resources to provide that filtering as opposed to other chemicals or additives.
That's great.
Yeah, this isn't a high contaminant loading facility like, say, a car wash would be. This is much lower. This is your average demand, which is what this design is meant for.
Thank you. It's very informative to hear that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Then I would look for a motion to open the public hearing. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
If we have a second, all in favor? Aye. Perfect. Public hearing is now open at 7:21. Any members from the public that wish to speak on the application? Going once? I have the gavel to, then I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion? And a second? I'm going to be relying on the two of you. Perfect. All right, all in favor? Aye. Aye, thank you. Public hearing is also closed at 7:21. So,
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
before, to address one of the issues that was discussed with regard to the fire approval, I did have a stipulation, number 2, in which, in conferring with the attorney, we went back through the records and actually found an email chain that was between the architect and the fire marshal saying that he agreed with the plan and that if any issues came up during the building permit process, they would certainly address them at that stage. So I'm recommending that we remove stipulation number 2, as that
Okay.
stipulation has been resolved with the fire marshal.
all right.
You're welcome.
Any disagreement with that? Okay. All right, well then if there's no other comments or questions for the applicant, we'll look for a motion to approve the master plan. Preliminary plan, sorry. I'll make the motion to approve the preliminary plan with the stipulations as outlined in the memo from Mr. Carullo, with number 1, lots 103 and 104 shall be merged by administrative subdivision prior to final approval, and that the applicant shall provide an excavation construction plan which may be combined with the soil and sediment control plan designed to mitigate the impact of construction on the abutting property, which shall include but not be limited to construction access, best practices for dust control and vibration, and hours of operation at preliminary approval. So that's a motion. We have a second. Roll call vote. Ms. Marandola? Yes. Dr. Roberts? Yes. And the chair votes yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, on to item number 8, public hearing and major land development for preliminary approval, Islander Solar, location 850 and 854 Iron Mine Road, Assessor's Plat 16, Assessor's Lot 18, and 19. So if the applicant is here to speak to that, or Mr. Carullo, if you have an introduction for the applicant.
As you may recall, Islander Solar was a project that has been before the planning board on 3 other occasions, I believe. It has a master plan approval, it has a zoning approval, and dimensional variances issued by the zoning board. They were back here for master plan approval. They've submitted just about everything required, and they are here now for the preliminary approval.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Kelly Morris Salvatore. Just to be sure we're all on the same page, I thought we were here for final plan approval.
I'm sorry, that's correct. It was
Yes.
here for preliminary plan approval. There were stipulations attached. The planning board requested, rather than administrative approval, thank you for that, a final approval. This is for final approval this evening.
Right.
So then, since that's listed as, in our agenda as preliminary approval, are we going to have issue with that?
You should not have issue because final approval by statute is authorized to be administrative.
Okay.
And the planning board was reserving that right, so it is a final approval. I don't believe there's any issue. There's no notice required, but the abutters are here, actually.
Okay.
And I think they would want to speak on this, too.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as Mr. Carullo said, we do have preliminary plan approval. At that time, you imposed 12 conditions. Essentially, I don't want to say essentially, virtually all of them have been complied with. In the planning staff's recommendation, Mr. Carullo lists 5 conditions to final plan approval, so I just want to go through those with you. The first one is to provide a photo simulation view plan that provides both before and after simulations of the view of the buffer, both before the evergreen buffer is installed and after. So we have provided those. They should be able to be viewed. Are they in that? They should be able to be viewed. It's a separate PDF? So I'm just going to go through them, and then, because I think that's the one you're going to really want to look at. Current general liability insurance policy, that's going to carry through the whole project. We will always have that. Similar to the last application, in terms of the emergency response plan, our client has worked with the public safety officials, and they have indicated that they'd like to look at that at building permit stage. So we'd ask at a minimum that you, instead of saying for final plan, that it be conditioned on building permit. And then the other 2 are for no blasting is allowed unless we come back to you. We don't expect to have any blasting. And that there'd be no use of herbicides to control vegetation. We don't intend to do that either. So at this point, I also have 2 members of the parent company of the solar facility from Nautilus, Amit Baptiste and Holly Crable. So they may be able to answer questions as needed. And I know the Crotos are here. I want you to know that both Ms. Crable and Ms. Baptiste have met with them separately on site, so to view the area. So I'm just going to let you look at the, do we have them? We don't have them at all?
We didn't get those until later on.
Do you have a copy of them? And I know that the Crotos have seen these. I've emailed them to them, and again, they've met on site. Mr. Chairman, may I approach? Yeah. So, that's the befores. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, just one second. The other ones were sent digitally. Yes. So. And I can put them up on my laptop if you like. Sure. I don't know, can she tie into that or no, with her laptop?
Should I email them to you?
Mr. Chairman, would you prefer to wait until we get them up on the screen before I describe what you're looking at?
I think that would be
Yes.
pertinent. Yeah.
Thanks.
Have the narrative go with, match the scene,
Yep.
the imagery. While we're waiting for that, So the stipulation that we have as item number 3, with the issuance of the building permit,
Yes.
could you just repeat what how you would like that to read? I don't know if have you seen these stipulations that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just trying to read them without my glasses. To developer, which shall include. Actually, it already says before the building permit, so that
Okay.
condition can remain.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that we have the wording right for you.
Yes, I appreciate that. He's going to bring them up on the screen, thanks. No, I actually have some. I better-
RUINSCJ2? Yes. Okay, thank you. I sent it. It's sent it. I'll tell you when it actually leaves my box.
Holly, when you're done, why don't you come up here, because you did this, so, in case there's questions.
Just waiting for it to come over.
It looks like it's it's one PDF, 2 pages. Oh, you got it.
So this is the second, this is the after, right?
No, that's the before. That's the after.
It's, okay. So frankly, I had a hard time with this because I couldn't see the solar panels at all, even with the first image. My clients had to explain what I was looking at. So particularly, Mr. Chairman, on camera 2, if you look really closely in on the right side for the before pictures, you can see some solar panels there. But there's a very dense natural buffer. And this is before they put in the evergreen. And then, so this is the after?
No.
Yeah. Can you show us the after? The next one? That is the next one. So it gets a little fuzzier over to the right because those are the evergreens that you can kind of see. But again, it's almost impossible to see the solar panels in the first image. So when you add the evergreen buffer, you really don't see them. And those were taken from two different vantage points. Do you want to add anything, Holly?
The other piece is that we are putting in privacy slats in the fence. So we would have the solar array with the fence and the privacy slats on it with the evergreens in front of that. And then we'd have approximately 220 feet of a natural forest buffer. So in the wintertime, when all the leaves are down, based on that viewpoint and the evergreens, you really won't see that at this level. And then in the summertime, the leaves on, you won't see it.
Yeah, and these were taken, you know, where there wasn't a lot of leaves on the trees. And as I said, this is the before that I'm looking at, that you're looking at, and it's really hard. I mean, you can see them, but it's not easy to see them. So I think with that, we'll let, you know, anybody else who wants to address you, unless you have any questions, Mr. Chairman?
I was going to open it up to the board if there's any questions from the board.
I would just like to understand like this is from the abutting property looking
Yes.
toward the
So-
parcel in question?
These are the same that I.
Yeah, it's just kind
Yeah,
of,
so
okay, it's easier
down
to see
here.
in print. Okay,
So this is camera 2, and this is camera 1, both looking, so there's two different view sheds.
May I step
Okay.
up?
that's helpful. I don't know, yeah.
Just as an example, looking at about where the north arrow is, that's about where their house is. So the picture was taken approximately from there, looking over this way, if that makes sense. And that's approximately 220 feet. So, yeah. And that's part of what we were doing yesterday, was to physically walk with them, look at them.
Okay. And then you said, so I know we have the two photos that are the before. And did we have the after of what that's going to look like? Once that goes in?
That is the
That is
after.
the
That is
after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is very similar.
Yeah.
In a picture like that,
Yeah.
well, a picture like that that's a little clearer, you see a shadowing of the evergreens where those solar panels that you can kind of see, you know? That's what there wasn't much of a difference between the before and after. I mean, I wanted the,
It's very subtle.
yeah.
And,
It-
sorry,
Mhm.
one more question. In camera angle 1, so this one, it looks like there's a trail going through that forested area. Who owns that land? And where does that trail go?
100 years ago or more, they used to mine granite back there. So
Okay.
it's existing, it's been there for
Okay,
100 years.
okay.
We use it quite a bit. That's my big concern is because the kids, my grandkids, and all of us use that.
Okay.
We don't see that. So,
I have a question. How will the vegetation be controlled since you're not using herbicide?
That's probably do you know the answer to that? I mean,
Well, we're going to be putting in grass, obviously, to,
Mhm.
around the solar panels, so they will be mowed.
Mhm.
There'll be
Would you
some
mind-
weed whacking around. some
Would you
of the-
mind going up to the microphone? and
Oh,
responding?
oh, I'm so sorry, yeah. Typically, we're going to be putting grass underneath all the solar modules, and it's maintained by, using mowers and weed whackers around the equipment, so we typically don't spray herbicides.
I don't know if this is the time to ask this, but please tell me if it's not, either Mark or Jeff. But in terms of, I was just looking at some of the stipulations, and one of them was not having a negative environmental impact. And some solar developers will plant pollinator crops
We're
to
definitely
add
putting in-
value.
Yeah, we plan to do that. We always want to put in the native pollinators in the area, because typically once they're established, they don't get very tall. We mow it like twice a year, so the natural seeds go back in the ground, and you get to the natural vegetation coming back up. We'll obviously want the trees to kind of be kept down, but yeah, they'll be flowering
Okay.
And that's probably
perennials.
all on the landscape plans that you reviewed
It
at
is.
preliminary plan.
Yeah, that's all part of the requirement. And we would do that anyway, because that's the right thing to do for the land.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? No. Okay. So then I'll look for a motion to open a public hearing. You have a motion? Do you have a second?
Second.
Do you have a second? All in favor? Aye. Public hearing is open at 7:39. For those of you who might want to come up, I think you might be an old pro at this by now, but name and address, and you can go right ahead. Address any questions that you have to us, and then we'll have the applicant respond to them.
I'm Donald Croto. We're direct abutter at 752 Iron Mine Hill Road. Now, as far as these pitches, that's pretty much a waste because all that's gonna be cut back to, because the solar farm's gonna be up, way up. Our property border is right down here. They only have to go 50 feet beyond that, and all the rest of that's coming down. That was my big concerns. They did say we'll basically work together on putting pine trees, whatever, to kind of block that area off, right? And if that works out, we're satisfied on our end, just so we don't have to look at the solar farm. Again, and it's very, the land actually slopes up from here, and there's a house in front of that, and we can see the house during the summer. When they were over, it was still leaves on the trees, and you can see the house. But again, if they can put up, as we talked about, putting up a barrier of trees, again, we're satisfied. So.
Can I just say two things? I said it many years, Croto, I'm his wife, a butter. I mentioned a few times in the last 2 weeks. My concern is, again, for me not to see that. And if I'm on my second floor, even on the first floor, my fear is that I will be able to see it. And again, is there a law against it or not? I do not know. And what can I do if there's no guarantee that I will not see it? And when all is said is done, if I do see it, what recourse do I have? That's number one. Number two is at the last meeting that I knew you were having this going on, I mentioned a question of sound, the transformer, and I've been told that the noise level is so small, I will not hear it. So my two concerns at this point is I don't want to see it and I do not want to hear it. Nobody's 100% sure that I will not be able to see it from the first or second floor because of the sloping noise. They said it's very minute and it's humming, and probably not, but humming, I hope I don't hear it. And again, what recourse do I have if I do hear it when all is said and done? That's all I've got.
I can speak at least for a moment. No? Oh, okay. I'm just waiting for the chairman. Of course.
Anybody else?
Look for a motion to, here, you know, I'll make the motion to close the public hearing tonight. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye, thank you. Public hearing is closed at 7:42. Please.
So I've spoken to the Crotos, and I've explained to them that, you know, in North Smithfield, you have noise ordinances, and there may be some minimal ambient noise that stems from this, but in no way can my client exceed the required maximum decibels in your town. And they, you know, they understand that. With regard to viewing any bit of the solar field, we cannot guarantee that they will not see any of the solar. But your zoning ordinance does a very good job of requiring certain buffers, which we are installing based on your zoning code. The solar field, respectfully, was granted by special use permit. We're at final plan. I know my client, as I've said to you in previous meetings, will do, you know, they're very cooperative with neighbors in my experience. if there's something they can do to help. But the solar field is allowed. It's allowed by a special use permit at this point. And, I mean, we're at final plan. Again, we will cooperate in any way we can, but we cannot guarantee that they won't see any of the solar panels.
The one thing I do want to address with the effects of sound, and I was listening to everything you were saying, but I was trying to pull up our zoning ordinance because I know that there is a portion of the solar ordinance that calls for pre-installation levels for sound transmission and post-transmission sound levels. So I would ask that we make sure that we do have that pre and post sound, those sound levels established. So then that way the neighbors and the abutters can have that baseline to go back to in the event that this does start to cause more noise than is allowed.
Yeah, so we intend to follow any requirements of your zoning
Okay.
ordinance.
Perfect. So then I think that and those will be filed with, the sound transmission, Mark and Bobby, does that get filed with you, or does that get filed with the building department?
It usually comes to us.
Okay. All right, great. So then we would expect to see that, please. Okay. Any other further comments from the board this evening? Okay. So then with that, we'd be looking for a motion for final approval in incorporation of the planning office recommendations that are outlined on the agenda.
Motion for final approval with the stipulations as outlined.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Ms. Marandola?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. All right, item number 9, public meeting, pre-application concept review for Mini Mart Quick Serve at 3 Greenville Road, Assessor's Plat 9, Assessor's Lot 435. Mr. Carullo.
This is, you might recall, this is the old Beef Bond property, and the applicant has requested to come in to the planning board to get some initial feedback on proposed gasoline station with drive-through to be located at the site of the former Beef Bond property. I think you received a copy of the current site plan. We have been through, to be honest with you, 3 or 4 iterations of this plan over the last year or so, and this is the most recent iteration that was presented to the planning office. We did have some comments on this plan, but if it proceeds forward after this evening, we'll certainly be re-reviewing the plan and addressing any comments the planning office had prior to this submission.
All right, spoken like a true Rhode Islander, the place that
Former.
used to
Yeah.
have Beef
Just
Bar.
so everybody knows where it is.
All right.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Elizabeth Noonan. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Adler, Pollack, and Sheehan, and I represent the applicant, who in this case is the potential purchaser of the property, Robert Fidel, who is here this evening. The broker, Scott McKee, the broker for the owner, is here, and Phil Henry of Civil Design Group, who put together the plan that Mr. Carullo just referred to. I have hard copies if you have any interest in those, or... So we, my client have been working with Mark, and we've been in touch, you know, as you said, over the last year or so, doing some different iterations of this plan. And what we wanted to do was really put it in front of the board this evening, sort of get some feedback or thoughts before we delve into master plan. We all know that's a lot more of time and money. So we thought that we could, if you guys could take a look at it and discuss it, and get your thoughts on it. As Mark has called out, this would need, obviously, your approval. It would also have to go to zoning as a gas station convenience store, requires a special use permit, some dimensional variances. Historically, there was a drive-through there. If you look on Google, it's still there. So we may have some legal discussion on what the relief is. That's all in the zoning area anyway. But if you wanted, I think, Phil, maybe you can just go through and walk through the program that you've outlined in these plans.
Good evening. My name is Phil Henry with Civil Design Group. We're the civil engineers on the project. I guess what I'd like to do is walk you through the concept sketch. So this plan was prepared solely based on available information that we've had to date, local GIS, Rhode Island GIS. So we've not released survey yet. So what you see here is what we think we can construct. Obviously, we would need to confirm through the means of master plan and so on. Those of you that are familiar with the site, which I'm sure all of you are, there's an existing retaining wall about 30 feet off the rear lot line. And in front of that, where the structure lied, it's pretty much all asphalt, all the way from Smithfield to Greenfield Road, particularly along the frontage of both streets. There's also about, I would say, an 8 to 9 foot grade change between what we're showing as proposed curb cut on 146A and this location approximately here. Through a number of iterations that I'm sure Mark has alluded to, we were showing curb cuts in various places, and ultimately we're showing them where they're being proposed right now, which is where pretty much largely where the existing curb cut is on 104, and then we're proposing one over on Smithfield Road. So I say that because some of the dimensional relief that may end up being required is predominantly due to the vertical constraints of the site as well as the geometry of the site. As you can see, the site's about an acre, but it's very uniquely shaped. It's not a rectangular square, which we'd like. And like I said, there's fairly significant grade change across that property. So with that being said, we are proposing a curb cut here. We're proposing a curb cut on 104. This gray area here, that's the proposed store with a drive-through on the back end. And we're showing it on the left side, if you will, to maximize vehicle queue from all of the proposed driveways. Four fueling dispensers located here in a square configuration, and that's going to be supported by 15 spaces around the site. As I alluded to, because of the grade change, you're probably looking at some sort of a fill wall along the front here and a cut wall continuing along with this existing retaining wall along the side that will stretch pretty much to Smithfield Road. So, with that being said, before we took the next step, we wanted to get some feedback from the board as it pertains to the overall use, the drive-through use, and the overall layout as you see it. Thank you.
Comments from the board? Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to name some concerns that I hear from residents over the years.
Absolutely.
One in particular consistent concern that I've heard people abutting such commercial endeavors is the brightness of the lights and how that impacts their home environment. And what I'm talking about is I've just heard that about Subaru a lot because of the lights. It's like a big car dealership. Sure. So I just wanted to name that because I know this area, like probably most of us do, and there's houses all around it. That's one thing. And another discussion that the chair, Gary Pilardi's not here tonight, but something that he and I over the years have really tried to promote, and I'm sure others, but I'm particularly naming him and me, is the idea of like the benefit to the community when something like this is being built. So like right now, there's that storage place being built across the street from it. Then there's like a strip mall and then a CT gas. So it's a lot of commercial and a lot of impervious surfaces. And if I think about communities that really at this phase of development want to build in benefits for the community, it would be things like things that soften the environment and make it not be so concrete everywhere, and especially thinking about heat islands, heat, extreme heat in the summer season and that kind of thing. Having all of that concrete and those businesses that have a lot of impervious surface, I would be very interested in how that environment can be softened and greened. Those are concerns of mine just off the bat. I'm sure there's other questions or comments, but I'll hear what anybody else has to say.
I mean, I just have general concern about the traffic flow in such a tight area. Certainly appreciate, I think we all wish it was a rectangle. So I don't know what to do with that, but that's certainly my first reaction, is just the concern around how to manage the traffic in and out of that parcel in a safe way.
Okay.
I would certainly echo those concerns as well. I know I see that we're starting to have the ingress and egress onto the site really close to that existing signal. I'm not sure how, understanding that there's also grade challenges that come with this, but previously on that site, it was always difficult to get off and on that site, and particularly because of the light. So if there was a way that we could pull that further as far as physically possible away from that light, I think that would certainly work to benefit that space. Because that was one thing that I was looking at here. And so you said that there's four fueling stations, so that would be 8 pumps. So, okay.
Correct.
And then other things that that you've probably heard this evening, and in past meetings, we look for solar readiness for the buildings, so we can accommodate that. I know that comes with a little bit more structural element for the building itself, potentially even for the pump island itself as well. That could certainly be beneficial. And then I'll echo that same concern that Dr. Roberts has had, is minimizing as much impervious land that we can. It looks like there could be the potential that we skinny up that left-hand side a little bit for the parking and everything if you're making that one way. Also knowing that that corner is probably trash removal and transformers and everything like that as well. So I think the more greenery in that we can implement on this this plot is difficult as it is. I think it would certainly go a long way.
I'll just give a few comments, and then Phil, if you want to jump in. Certainly, as we go through both your process and zoning, the lights are always a factor on these. Both Phil and I have worked on a lot of convenience stores at locations throughout the state, so there's certain ways, you tip the lights down, they go off at certain times depending on the hours of the store, so absolutely understand that one. In terms of traffic, as you said, we haven't done all that hard work yet, but we would certainly have traffic impact. Standing here, I don't know which or either of those are state highways, so DOT would be involved in any curb cuts on those, and certainly topography, is a challenge. But anything, if we come to you, we'll have traffic reports addressing or dealing with that. Any recommendations or proposals to make it better in terms of that, as well as the drive-through flow. And then in terms of sort of the landscaping, I thought Phil said it was asphalt now. A lot of it was asphalt. So landscaping is required. Not that it's a convenience store, but I did the Slatersville Mill project a few years ago. So it's been a few years since I've been up here. And I like at least all the projects I have to make them, fit into the community as much as I think that project, was a bonus for the community. So I think those are all issues that were some of them were on our radar, but not all of them. So I definitely appreciate that. And I'll let Phil add anything else.
Sure. I'll just add that I guess the story that we'd like to tell tonight is one of redevelopment. So this, essentially, it's all asphalt right off the curb, or right off the edge of roadway, all the way back to this existing retaining wall here. So although be it, we're not gonna, or although be it, as it's shown, we don't have the requisite landscape width along the frontage, from an effective standpoint, there's zero here today, but if you were to take from where we're proposing the curb line, which is pretty much at the existing, just behind the shoulder line, all the way into the site, you could have upwards of 15 to 20 feet of landscaping, although half of it might be within the right-of-way, or a fraction might be within the right-of-way, or we can look to, maintain sidewalks or increase sidewalks, or so to your point, in terms of the environment, I think I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being a reduction of impervious area. However, with that being said, because of the use, we'd still be applicable to, robust stormwater controls through DEM. So, thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, I also just wanted to name that on this plan, it shows trees across the street from it, but that's now a, the storage place. So, I was just pointing that out in case anyone saw that and seemed like it wasn't consistent with what I was saying. And it kind of underscores how, unattractive that area is, and how just like, in some ways it's a gateway to North Smithfield, but it's not very attractive. And, I just kind of wanted to underscore it. It already sounds like you're minded that way, but I just wanted to emphasize that it does feel like an opportunity for redevelopment, like you're saying, and something that's just more just appealing and respectful. And if you look at that, the houses are right up against that. So I just want to be mindful of the people living right next to there, because the beef barn was like a pretty low impact place. It didn't have big lights, and it was like an old favorite of the town. So that's like a charm that it did have, and people felt fond about it. So this is like the concept and the type of thing that it is different in nature. And I just feel like the more that such a development can give back to the community, that will be like a reciprocal kind of relationship. So,
Thank you.
The only other question that two thoughts that I had was, what were and I know we're very early on in stages, planned hours of operation? I know you brought up the hours, lights being on and off, but I didn't know if you're looking to have this be 24 hours, if you're looking to have this be 5 a.m. to, midnight or something like that.
We honestly haven't gotten as far as possible. I can assure
Okay.
you any business owner is going to say as much as time as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we recognize it's up against a neighborhood. But again, having dealt with other convenience stores in other locations, we've actually had neighbors right behind us with drive-throughs, and we've done sound analysis. So there's a lot of those. So the answer to the hours is I don't know right now. We'll have a better idea, when we proceed forward on that.
Okay. And then the other thought and request that sometimes I'll make is just looking at the vernacular architecture of the area as well. So we're not dropping in, something that looks like doesn't belong. Certainly want to be consistent with the language of the residences around. And, unfortunately, as we've noted, the storage place across the way is, CMU and metals, corrugated metal siding. We would really like to not see that.
Not see that. Okay, I get that. That makes sense. So again, we haven't developed along those lines, but
Great.
I hear
So,
that.
The natural stone and brickwork, masonry, I like to stay away from the vinyl siding. If maybe go with a fiber cement siding, which looks a little bit more in line with the community aesthetic, but certainly not just standard CMU block would be appreciated.
Any potential or any thoughts of any existing buildings to look at, or anything you might pop in your mind?
You can I think driving through town, you can kind of get a good feel for the aesthetic.
Yeah.
We have, we're in one good example of our historic architecture right now, and, going through, especially Union Village, as you go up towards Smithfield Road, there's a lot of good examples there too.
Sure. we'll make it look like the beef barn now. I understand the fondness everyone had for that, but, yeah.
Great.
So,
Mr. Carullo, I know you had said there's been a couple iterations. Did you want to include any comments at this time, or?
Well, I agree with the softening of the landscape and increasing the landscape area on the site, and, you know, without getting into detail now, because this is really a conceptual plan, I did have a proposal where eliminate, you know, actually adding a driveway access and thereby eliminating the full circulation around the building and incorporating additional landscaping by removing the vehicles from the site. You know, and the further, I guess that'd be north, that would be westerly, right? And then just adding landscaping between Greenville Road up to the side of the building. That's one of the things that I was looking at.
our drive-through is pretty integral to the model, so I'm not, try to work with those as much as we can. Yeah.
I think you're getting pretty positive feedback
Yeah.
for the site, so I don't think you'll get any objection if you start moving into master planning.
Okay,
So we look forward to seeing it the next go-round.
that's great, thank you, nice to see you, nice to be here.
All right,
Thanks.
great, thank you. Skip over item 10 because there are no administrative subdivisions, so we'll jump to item 11. This is the fun part of adjournment. We have a motion to adjourn, and we have a second. All in favor? Aye.